Hey there, I think we are live. So what I want to do in this little session for you is highlight what exactly is going on underneath the surface when our bodies are experiencing stiffness and tension, and show you kind of like under the hood what's taking place within your body, within your brain, like help you get a really clear understanding of what the heck is happening. And along with that, I want to share some strategies you can use to really start to move forward through this. Now, it's important to understand that the tension you're experiencing, I should say, Phileas here will be my guest of honor, helping me kind of elucidate some of this. Now, tension, when you're experiencing it, is really nothing more, it's no different than when you're contracting a muscle, right? Like if you're going to squeeze a muscle. Stiffness, tension, the only difference is that those are muscular contractions that are unconscious. They're going on without you voluntarily squeezing those muscles. So if you're living every day and you're noticing tension in your neck, in your shoulders, in your back, basically that's a sign that those muscles are active all freaking day, just without you voluntarily squeezing them. But it's important to know that our bodies don't do things on accident. Like there is a reason for it. I actually don't have my contacts in, so I can't see who's saying that. Oh, hello. So I'm going to have a hard time actually reading things as they come up because I have my contacts out. I want to give my eyes a little break. That's a story for a whole other day. But this tension that you feel within yourself, this tension you're experiencing, at the end of the day, it's just a muscular contraction. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but if I were to ask you to basically squeeze your bicep for the rest of this little video, you would have a hell of a time sticking with that for really any period of time without discomfort setting in, tension setting in, before you say, like, can I let go of this contraction at this point? So this tension is how we accomplish everything we do. So it's not to say that it's necessarily bad, but if it's taking place beneath the surface of conscious awareness, if it's outside of your control, well, then it can be problematic pretty quickly. But it's important to keep in mind that, your brain, we'll say that's roughly a brain, right? You'll have to forgive some of the chalk scratch. But your brain is constantly in dialogue with the rest of the body. And when I say brain, it's actually a little sloppy even. Your central nervous system is in constant dialogue with the rest of the body. And that in turn is in constant dialogue with the nervous system again. Now, this dialogue, this back and forth communication between your nervous system, between your body, it's taking place in a very special language, right? It's not German, not English, not Arabic, not Mandarin. Whatever language it is that you speak, the body speaks its own language. And that language is sensorimotor feedback, yeah? So the body is taking in all of this sensory information from the outside world, from that internal environment as well. So on the one hand, you have sensing. And then on the other hand, you get these totally different neurons within the body, those little cells within your nervous system, and they send motor outputs, yeah? So you have sensing and you have moving. And it's this dialogue of things that really helps your body figure out how to do anything it's ever going to do, right? We take in sensory information, we process that sensory information, and we respond to the world around us and the world within us through movement. Now, very often, this works quite well all on its own. Like there are all sorts of things that you don't think about that you've gotten good enough at that you don't have to give it a second thought. You take in sensory information, you move, right? You don't think it through, I would assume, when you tie your shoes, or when you get up out of a chair, or when you breathe, when your heart beats. Like these are things that happen without us having to give a whole lot of thought. I gotta zoom in a bit and see, some people are just watching, okay. Again, my contacts are out, so forgive me if I crane myself in to see here. So anyway, this sensorimotor feedback loop is always going on. You can't not communicate in this language. It's always taking place. Now, it can take place more effectively or less effectively, more efficiently, or less efficiently, yeah? So when there is ongoing tension, as we've talked about already, you can kind of guess what's happening. As I said earlier, that's not dissimilar from when you are squeezing a muscle voluntarily, right? So that tension, we might say, is kind of over here. Now the challenge is that ongoing tension, that stiffness that you're feeling, it's gunking up the gears a bit in this communication, yeah? So it's bringing all sorts of noise into the sensory information that your central nervous system is taking in, yeah? So there's now all sorts of noise. And what happens when there's all sorts of noise and you can't discern a signal? The message doesn't get through. Now, here's where this gets to be quite an issue for us. When we have, stiffness, tension, as we just explored, that introduces all sorts of noise into the system, and that means that if you have crappy inputs in, you're going to get crappy outputs out. It's just the nature of the beast, right? So what that means is that your quality of movement then diminishes, not only in the range of motion, but even in the organization of the different joints within the body. Your overall quality of movement suffers. So this stiffness then spirals you down to, I hope that chalk isn't squeaking for you. This stiffness spirals down into poor movement, yeah? And we could just say poor quality movement is any number of things. 1, it doesn't get the job done. 2, if it gets the job done, it doesn't get the job done well. 3, it's just not pleasant to go through that movement, right? Like, I'm sure there are all sorts of things you can do day in and day out, like you can get by, but it's not as pleasurable as you might like, right? For a lot of people, the way they get up and down from the ground, they can do it. They can kind of heave-ho themselves, but it's not a very enjoyable experience. And it's not very mechanically efficient, right? There's a whole lot of extra work going on. Maybe they're shearing through the knee when they push in a particular part. Maybe they're compromising the discs that make up the spine, like whatever. There are all sorts of things that might qualify as poor movement. Now what happens in that case is you actually spiral a little bit lower, and I hope you can still see this on the camera here. You spiral into an increased risk of injury, yeah? Because if you move poorly, I hope it's a no-brainer for you that then you set yourself up for more injury. Now, what does our body do when we injure ourselves, right? We tweak a knee, we roll an ankle, we throw out the back, whatever. We just feed that right back up into more stiffness, because what the body does when there is tension, when there is pain, when there's an injury, the body braces around that particular point, right? Like, you know this, if you hurt a particular part of the body, it gets stiff. It's harder to move it, and that's a protective mechanism. Basically, it's the body's way of saying, hey, this isn't safe, yeah? So let's really lock it down. Now, again, that's a protective mechanism. Trying to override that and just move through an injury, not good, not smart necessarily. So that stiffness is there for a reason. And yet, as we well know, when you get more stiffness, you gunk up the movements even more, yeah? So then this cycle gets even worse. Your movement diminishes in quality even more. You move through less range of motion, you move with less ease, you move with more kind of jerkiness and less strength, less control. It's not good. Now, what does that lead to? Well, again, that sets you up even further for more injury. And this cycle is just a really nasty feedback loop. So even if you're feeling like just a little bit of tension now, what that means is that your movement is suffering. You are not moving with a sense of elegance, with a sense of control, with a sense of just enjoyment as you could, right? So if you move poorly, you risk injury, and again, it just feeds back up into itself. So I've seen again and again with people that this cycle can really spiral. Like, there was a guy who reached out to me a few months ago, and he had basically sprained both wrists. Now, he decided he wasn't in a position where he could afford for us to work together. He thought, it doesn't feel like it's really necessary at this point. So his movement suffered, and he called me back a few weeks later and he said, hi, yeah, shit hit the fan, we need to get this together. Because what had happened was, because he wasn't moving well, he fell down a flight of steps, so he injured himself more. Not only did he have the wrist things from before, but he banged up a knee, he banged up an ankle, and he landed on both wrists. That injury, go figure, led to a whole lot more tension, to the point where his wrist couldn't move more than this. I don't know about you, but I make use of much more than this range of motion every single day, right? There are things like grabbing a cup out of the counter, whatever. This is problematic, yeah? So if you're dealing with low-level stiffness and tension every single day, basically that is gunking up the communication between your nervous system and the rest of your body. And that means you're not going to move well. It means you're risking injury in realistically every activity you ever engage in through the day, which then just sets you up for more stiffness. And of course, the cycle continues. So, Chandler, I can hear you screaming from the other end, Chandler, what do I do? How do I fix this? We'll get there. So, in this case, where did all of this start? Like, if we think back to the very beginning of this little video, where did this start? Well, it started with crappy inputs coming in. There wasn't the quality information because all of that tension was gunking things up in the first place. So, how do you move out of this cycle? This cycle, I should say too, is a cycle called sensorimotor amnesia. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this before. Often abbreviated just as SMA, not SMH. SMA, yeah, sensorimotor amnesia. So, in order to get yourself out of this cycle, and I should say too, this is an exhausting cycle to be in because if you followed the experiment of squeezing that muscle the entire time, it's exhausting. You are literally burning stupid, useless energy all day, every day if you've got this low-level tension. So if you're tired all the time, if you've got energy dips, if you're fatigued, if you wonder, is this what it's like just to get old? No. What's happening is that you are wasting a lot of your valuable resources just on this nasty cycle of stiffness and poor movement and injury, and your body doesn't have a choice but to burn those calories, not in a useful way, not in you're going to tone your buns and slim down kind of way. You're burning literal energy just holding those tissues in place, holding that muscular contraction, yeah? This costs energy for me to be in this position. And if I start to slump forward throughout the day as I'm typing away, all of this is making my body work more than it needs to. So yeah, you might get some swole muscles, but I don't think anyone is really looking for chiseled spinal erectors, right? It's not good when all of the muscles along your back have to work overtime to hold you upright because you can't just find a good alignment, yeah? So all of this to say that there's a way out, but it's going to take a bit of energy going into it, yeah? This is the path of least resistance. This is the default. The world isn't set up for you to move well. It's just not. Culturally, that's not something we seem to give a shit about, yeah? So we remove movement day to day, so we move less, which means we get less sensory information in, which means we move worse, which you know how it goes, yeah? So how do we get out of this? Well, I would say the very easiest recommendation is hopefully an obvious one. If it hurts, don't do it. Because if your body gets the signal that it hurts to move in a certain range, well, you will only brace even more. So simple strategy for you is if you are in pain, don't continue to move in that way. Yeah, if it hurts for you to squat, don't just keep squatting and hurting. Your body's just going to get more tense. It's going to make your movement quality worse. And I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, so let's move very quickly past that. Yeah. So no pain. Try to avoid pushing into pain. Now, where we started with all of this was crappy sensory information coming in because of that tension in place. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, but we're just going to have to make the best of it. So what you do in this case is you introduce new sensory information in. Basically, your nervous system is getting the ongoing signal that, ow, this hurts, or I'm unstable here, let's brace. So you need to introduce new sensory information. New inputs allows you to have new outputs. If you want to move better, you must introduce new inputs into that area. Now, there are all sorts of ways you might do this. A general strategy, something that you might try for yourself, is if there's a particular movement that hurts, tweak it in some way. Slow it down. Try it, there are endless different variations you can add in. I would say the easiest is slow the movement down, make the movement smaller, go through whatever feels like a comfortable range. That's a really good way to start to introduce new sensory information in. Because if the only inputs you're getting are ow, tense, pain, hurt, does not compute, it's not very good. So really, any sensory information in that case would be better than ow, painful, hurt, tense. Like even just tapping along that area that feels like a little dicey. This is sensory information. This is something your body can make use of, yeah? So new inputs is basically the easiest thing to do. Or what you can do is move in different ways, right? Introduce variety into your movement. And this is why I say it's a chicken and an egg thing, because when you introduce variety in your movements, we'll just say variety move, very technically speaking, yeah? When you introduce variety into your movements, that introduces new inputs. Those new inputs allow you to move in new ways. And so you get, rather than a slow spiral downward, maybe not even a slow spiral, it can be pretty quick. Rather than you spiraling downward in your ability to live life, yeah? When you introduce a variety of movements and new sensory inputs to your nervous system, that spiral then goes up and in the other direction. So all of this to say, like, these are really simple strategies. Like, yes, you might have to play around with it a bit. Blame life, I guess. Like, look at an infant and the way that an infant moves, yeah? They're going through all sorts of variety of movement. They are doing nothing but moving throughout the day, and as they do that, they're getting all sorts of new inputs into the system. Now, out of all those inputs, they're getting a sense of what feels good, what is effective and functional, what is efficient, what helps me get that food, what helps me reach that thing, what helps me play with this toy. And as they do that, they're learning what we might call attractor states. Now, I don't want to get too deep into like the systems of how movement actually works on this video, but basically there are all sorts of different options you can move. Like there are infinite different pathways. There's kind of just a broad field of possible options. And some points within this broad field of possible options are very stable, yeah? There aren't too many ways that you can get up and down from the ground to stand. There are certain stable ways of doing that. And you can come up with all sorts of fancy other ways, but realistically, in order to stand up from the ground, you got a handful of options. Now, the more of those options you have access to, and the more control you have over each of those options, the better. But realistically, there are only a few ways to skin a cat well. So, these attractor states are what we find when we go through a variety of movements and introduce new inputs. We basically find more stable, more effective, and more efficient ways of doing the things we want to do. All of which gives us this incredible sense of pleasure and of ease, right? Like it's not fun to struggle through a movement. That makes you want to move less, which, as we well know, then sets you up for more injury, more tension, all of that. So if you can enjoy, maybe that's even a fourth main principle for us here, if you can enjoy the movement you're doing and find a sense of pleasure in it, you're more likely to do it. The more likely you are to do it, the more variety you are to find. The more variety you are to find, the more inputs you get into the system. Yeah? So again, this creates a very positive feedback loop that spirals you up, rather than having you just like slowly waste away and reduce your capacity. Now, I don't mean to be doom and gloom and grim about it, but that's just the truth. Like, if you don't jump on this and get ahead of that curve, it gets worse very quickly. Like that guy I was talking about earlier, this isn't just, I should say, for old people, right? People of age, or whatever we want to call it, right? This isn't just for people in their like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever. This guy I was talking about is like in his 20s and basically found himself unable to move his wrist. That's problematic for someone in their 20s, yeah? That's problematic for anyone at any age, but it's just not good. So all of this to say, like, these things can get worse at any age, and the benefit of that, they can get better at any age. So for those folks who might be inclined to say, well, it's fine, it makes sense if you're in your 20s or 30s, like, any age you can improve. There is no limit to the amount of improvement you can make in a quality of movement, and there is no limit to the age you are where you can find improvement. Now, it can be way easier to make improvement the sooner you get started, because the deeper you spiral downward into that crap cycle of tension and pain and poor quality movement and injury, like the deeper you groove into that, it's basically like your body really learns how to be in pain. The thing that I always think of, the way that I explain this to people is like, you know, when you're skiing, the most popular path down the mountain because it has the deepest grooves, like it's the most densely packed snow. So here you are in the pain and tension mountain, or the movement mountain, we'll say. It doesn't have to be pain and tension, but it so often is, because you groove that into your nervous system. You strengthen those neurological connections of pain and of tension. Effectively, you learn how to be in pain, to the point where if you do this for weeks, months, years, decades, like, it's gonna take a long time to break out of that. Like, if you find yourself in the cycle of chronic pain, it's like, build a time machine, go back 20 years, and get started on this then rather than now. If you're unable to do that, get started on breaking out of this cycle now rather than in another chunk of time. Because the less able you are to move, to articulate the various parts of yourself, to flow freely in whatever different positions you want, the less fun you're going to have moving, the less inclined you will be to move, and then, again, the cycle continues. So, don't find yourself on Pain Mountain. Introduce new, pleasurable movements. Do so with awareness. Like, pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to your experience. That's really what this comes down to, is like, notice what you are actually aware of within yourself, within the way you move, within the way you feel, within what feels easy, what feels pleasurable. Yeah? The more attention you pay to these, and the more you explore that process, the better and better things are going to get. So, again, this cycle, this communication of sensing and moving, of perception and action, it's always taking place. It's either taking place really well, or it's taking place really poorly. And the beautiful thing is, you have a say in the matter. So you don't just have to settle for the way things are. Anytime you see someone online say, like, well, it's just the way things are, like, it's garbage. That's just not how the body works. There is always room for improvement. But trust me when I say the default path is not improvement. And it's through no fault of your own. It's just, that's the way life is set up. Life is not set up to have you move in a variety of ways throughout the day. Like, the more convenient we make things, the more comfortable we make things, the less we move, the less of ourselves that we move. Yeah? So, like, you might move a lot less, and you might move a lot less of your parts, basically. And all of that comes into play, like, when you then go to move next. Like, it's frankly dangerous when someone just goes from sitting 8 to 10 hours a day and then just jumps into, like, a high impact whatever, or like, whatever the movement practice might be. It's like, okay, you're taking this junker of a car and asking it to go 60 miles an hour like that. It's just, it's not going to happen. You're going to blow the engine out. You're going to blow your knee out, or whatever. Yeah? So get ahead of this sooner rather than later. Like, pay attention. Don't push into pain. Move in ways that are pleasurable and enjoyable. Move in new ways, too. If you do those things, life is going to get better. If you don't do those things, life is going to get worse. It's going to be less fun, more full of tension, more full of injury. It's just not a good situation to be in. Like, when I think about this guy, it's like, damn, if we had gotten started weeks before he fell and landed on his wrists, like, we could have saved him a lot of grief. A lot of, like, spared him time off work, spared him having to move in with this, like, all of this. Like, the guy was dependent, total loss of independence, which is, at any age, it feels like a crime against ourselves when we lose our independence. Yeah? I mean, you owe it to yourself to maintain as much of your human dignity as possible. And the way you do that is by being able to move the way you want. Yeah? I mean, this isn't just about doing tricks. This is really about how you want to live your life for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next half of your life. So you've got a say in the matter. You can do something about this starting, like, right now, you know? Again, don't push into pain. move slowly through this. Pay attention to what you're actually experiencing. When you do so, you reinforce those new inputs into the system. When you're moving in new ways, too, like that makes it just adds more juice into it, yeah? And then enjoy yourself, however you can as you go through it. Like whatever is fun and helps you move in new ways, it's going to be much easier to stick with it. Like really, when you're making a change, any kind of change, there is an energetic input in where it will take effort to make a change. It will take you changing things in order to make a change, yeah? Anyone who promises you just like a totally easy fix is lying to you and trying to sell you something. That's just the truth of the matter. It's going to take work to come up over the top of this little mountain, but then afterwards, then you get to enjoy the new habits. Then you get to enjoy the downhill slope of things working better for you. But before things work better, you have to cross this kind of threshold point. And that means you're going to need to do something about it. Or not. It's totally up to you. But that's what's really going on when you're experiencing tension within your system. Yeah? It's not dissimilar from you just squeezing your muscles all day. The only difference is that this is happening below the level of your conscious attention. It's like you have left the lights on at the house and then blindfolded yourself. So you don't actually know what's on and what's off. You don't know what's where, and maybe you can't even find the damn switches anymore. So if you would like help finding the switches, turning off some of that background tension, what I would recommend is shoot me a message or let's hop on a call and talk through this. Unless you do this professionally, I get that this is it's a new language that you're learning how to speak, right? So if you'd like, go to chandlerstevens.com/apply. When you get there, you'll see a link to my calendar. It's a little button. You say, click to book an appointment. It'll open up whatever slots I've got available for you. I opened up a bunch more this week because I just got out of a 2-week training immersion where we talked about a lot of this stuff in depth. So anyhow, all that to say, I've got a lot more time to actually help you move past this stuff if you're inclined to move past it. Now, whether you do or not, that's up to you. Again, chandlerstevens.com/apply. So, take your pick. If you found this useful and you think you're going to figure it out on your own, go for it. Please, again, the principles are simple, right? Pay attention. Don't move into pain. Do so in a way that's pleasurable. Move in new ways and introduce new inputs into the system. I've given you some ideas to work with. So try it. Run free. Or if you'd like to shortcut it, believe me, there are really quick ways we can do this. So let's talk it over and see if this is something I can help you with. chandlerstevens.com/apply. Super simple. And you go there, you'll find my calendar, you can book a time. I'll call you up and we'll see what we can dig into, see what kind of strategies you can put into place for your particular situation. And with that said, if you've got other questions related to this, drop them in the comments, ping me a message, happy to help you out. But I hope this was useful. I'm going to give Phileas a break here from holding this bad boy up, and we'll talk soon. Where's that button? Oh, God.